Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the fourth and final session in the Foundation Future Leaders Conference 2021. I'm Rory, the chair for the session, one of the Foundation Future Leaders for 2021. I'm also Innovation Fellow at the Centre for Enzyme Innovation at University of Portsmouth. This session is focusing on innovating for change and a sustainable future. For this, we're taking sustainability in a broad context, connecting to the talks yesterday on COP26, but also connecting to sustainability of the innovations from an economic sense, connecting to the first session yesterday morning. We'll also dip a bit into some of the skills that are required for this, connecting to the previous session this morning as well. So really a nice concluding session. But I'm joined by four brilliant panelists from across the innovation ecosystem. First, we'll be starting in terms of structure of two talks from Indra Mukherjee and Peter Waggett. And then we'll also be joined for a Q&A session with Veal and Vicky Newman, who are also members of the Future Foundation Future Leaders. Brilliant. So without further ado, I will hand over to Indra Mukherjee, who is Chief Executive Officer of Innovate UK and is the UK's innovation agency. He's highly experienced technology CEO and business leader with a track record of leading innovation and technology commercialization at businesses of all sizes from across the world, and has a strong personal interest in the development of skills for industry. He co-founded the UK Electronic Skills Foundation and served on SEMPTA board for 9 years. He has a degree in engineering science from Oxford University and is a graduate of Wharton Advanced Management Programme and speaks several European languages. So we are very lucky for him to join us this morning. So Indra, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Rory, and good morning to everybody. So Indra Mukherjee, nice to meet you. 6 months into my first role in the public sector as a long-standing business guy, this has been a very interesting experience. So I'd like to share a few perspectives with you, both from a private sector point of view and also from a public sector point of view of the world of innovation as I see it. I've worked in my career for different types of organizations, which have ranged from businesses with dozens of people to businesses with hundreds of people, and businesses of thousands of people. And I've been a CEO for the last 25 years of my career. So I've had the experience of leading different examples of businesses, from the very small through to medium sized to the very large. I've seen tech innovation across hardware, software, manufacturing, intellectual property, licensing, M&A, restructuring, spin out, growth, turnaround, in different countries, cultures, and I've lived and worked across the different parts of the world, both for public listed businesses, VC, and private equity. So why I said all that is because I've got a bit of a sense of the different experiences of the innovation journeys in different settings. The innovation journey, when done well, can be fantastic, one of the best things to do, and it could also have examples where it goes very badly. And the power of innovation can really make a difference to our society, to our economy. And that's what I want to come on to in some of the things that I want to share. So you don't need me to tell you that we are certainly living in very challenging times. These are times of huge change, but also times of massive opportunity, an opportunity to create what we all hope is a better future. We want to see a future of prosperity, good health, respect for our planet and environment, and a future of fairness, diversity, and equality. And innovation, which is for me the process which turns science and technology into added value business reality, is the vital ingredient to creating that future. And it's the vital ingredient to energizing the future, and that's why I'm really pleased to be on this panel and to speak about this this morning. So I lead Innovate UK, which is the UK's innovation agency. We drive productivity and economic growth to support businesses to develop and realize the potential of their new ideas, including those from the UK's world-class research base. We are the beating heart of the UK innovation system. So our mission includes engaging with young, innovative businesses to support and de-risk their innovation journey, helping them to thrive with a view to these businesses later becoming scale-up businesses here in the UK. This is our hope, this is our ambition, this is our dream. So we support thousands of businesses through innovation grants, through loans, and through our very substantial networks right across the UK. So we have the Innovate UK Edge network, we have our knowledge transfer network, and our catapult network. And all of these networks support businesses at various stages as they start up through their journey to what we hope is the hope to scale up. Success for us is managed through the measure of economic and societal impact generated by the companies we support. And so we take the whole issue of their scale-up journey very, very importantly, very, very seriously. We also take our role as a public service seriously. So we are a public service to UK business. And so we deploy public money for impact. And we work to use that public money to leverage private capital for innovation. And we are accountable for the use of that public money. And we need to meet good standards and high standards, which are audited in terms of how we use that public money. And so invariably, in amongst all the thousands that we can support, there are inevitably some that we can't. And that's just a fact. And so really the intention is for us to use the public capital to its best effect and get the best return on investment for the UK. In terms of the work that we do, I like to use 3 words to describe the role that we play: inspire, involve, and invest. So we want to inspire the finest minds to become innovators, to come through the system and to create value through innovation. We want to involve what is a very diverse and broad ecosystem in the UK. There are many bodies, groups, associations, labs, organizations, many different bodies. And so it's really important to harness the power of this ecosystem. And Innovate UK plays an important role in convening and harnessing that community and bringing it together. And then the third aspect is invest. And so we invest both cash and non-cash resources to de-risk innovation, to facilitate our domestic and international collaboration so that we can encourage private investment and drive impact in the UK business innovation. As we support the journey from science and discovery through to ideas and to innovation for business impact, we work very hard across the whole ecosystem, as I mentioned. You may know that in the summer, the UK government launched an innovation strategy. I think the first one of those for many, many, many years. And this was a very important step, a very important milestone in showing the focus, the current focus on innovation. Innovate UK has just launched a plan for action to develop from that strategy, the government strategy, and how we are going to work to implement that going forward. That plan for action was launched at the end of last week. You can see it online, and it includes 5 themes for action. These are: theme 1 is to talk about the future economy. As you may know, one of the perennial challenges in innovation and work that you need to do for tomorrow. And you need to make the right balance between the two, because working to serve today is not good just by itself, and so you've got to do tomorrow as well. The next theme is growth at scale. This is something really important for the UK. We need to develop businesses that can really grow and scale, ideally here in the UK. And that's an important area. And our work on that is really essential to build the economy that we want to for the future. Our third theme is about global opportunities. The UK is 1% of the world population and I think it's about 1.5 or 2% of GDP. So there's a lot of the world outside the UK. And so we want to help our businesses to be able to access those opportunities, to work with them and grow and expand UK-based business, UK employment by gaining opportunities around the world. And also to partner with businesses, international businesses, and encourage them to invest in the UK. The fourth theme is about the innovation ecosystem, which I mentioned earlier, and that's very, very diffuse in the UK, and one that we really need to do a lot of work to convene and pull together so we can get the best out of it. And the fifth theme was about government levers. And this is really important too, because in the UK, we have the opportunity to utilise better innovation in terms of public procurement, government programmes, etc. And Innovate UK works very hard in that regard to help businesses, to help them in that journey too. And the 6 foundations that you'll see when you look at our plan for action are science and research strengths, which is very significant in the UK, design, which is often an under-considered aspect of innovation, the societal impact and responsible innovation, that's really important too, because the innovation with responsibility is becoming a more and more of a big thing as we go forward. Having a societal responsibility in terms of how you innovate. The need to harness talent and skills, which I'll come back to later. Equality, diversity, inclusion, which I'll also come back to later. And the 6th foundation is about place and levelling up. And Innovate UK already operates throughout the UK, and it's very important for all of us as a society to remember that we want to spread the opportunity around all deserving parts of the UK. And for you as leaders, that will become a very important part of your work going forward. So I want to maybe conclude with a few thoughts on some themes as we go into 2022, and some themes that I want to share with you, which are important to me as a new leader of Innovate UK, and which will have my energy and focus as we go into 2022 and beyond. I mentioned earlier about impact. Impact is a really important part, because too often things that are done in the public environment, the focus is on the input. And for me and for us as an organization, our focus is on the output and ultimately the outcomes. And so impact is a very, very important thing to measure. So we've gone a long way in developing a logic model to link our inputs, outputs, and outcomes, and to be able to have a holistic way of looking at how we would measure innovation going forward and how we'd measure the success of what we do. And this includes things like private capital leverage. This includes things like growth of companies. There are many other parameters, and this is an important area that I think would be very interesting to pay attention to for the future, and one that I'd be very happy to answer questions on later, or get advice and inputs from smart people. But this is a very important area for our work, the measurement of impact. I also want to point out that I mentioned earlier about place and levelling up. Innovate UK is already very well represented across the UK, and we already very well represented in all regions of England and also the devolved nations of the UK. So we have representatives in each of these areas, programs that support businesses in all of those areas, and a very, very dispersed and fair way of going about that. I think this will become a very much more important part of our role as innovators and people within this ecosystem. I think place is becoming a much more important part, and I think that's very good, and I think that's very important. I mentioned earlier about leveraging private capital. This is a very big thing for us. So one of the reasons why we deploy public money is to help leverage private money into innovation, money from industry, money from businesses, money from financial sponsors. And we have great examples of all those groups here in the UK. So during 2022, you'll see what we're calling the Transformer Project, which is to bring together the two ends of the businesses that we've invested both cash and non-cash resources into, and there are many thousands of those businesses. And on the other side, the access to private capital through corporate venturing, private venturing, VCs, private equity, angel funding, etc. So whilst it's not our role as Innovate UK to make the market, because we're a public service and we remain neutral, but we can help facilitate that market by convening the two sides of it, because it's really going to be important to make sure that we leverage private capital into business innovation in the UK. As a public service, I want to create a very clear shop front for Innovate UK to be able to be visible and accessible to all UK business. This will need work and a development beyond where we are today. Where we are today is okay, it's fit for purpose, but I think we have some way to go in terms of doing that. And so you'll see this come to fruition in 2022, and you'll see a much clearer shop front where UK business can find its services, needs, products that we can supply, and we can help them with their innovation journeys. And that's a very strong ambition that I've got, and one that all our team is working on very, very substantially. I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 people issues to close off this, this short talk. First of all, skills. Of course, we need the technology and engineering skills pipeline to build the innovations and the innovators of the future. There is no doubt about that. And that's something that the UK has traditionally been okay at, but could do better. And this is why our attention as leaders into the skills pipeline is extremely important. But I also want to add the importance of blending in commercial skills in addition to technology and engineering skills. To be a successful innovator, to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to blend the two together. Global markets are very tough, they're very competitive. And so it's really important for technology-based innovators, for technology-based leaders to also develop commercial skills, sales, marketing, product launch, PR, communications. All these things are essential, negotiations, and also understanding of different cultures and different aspects of international business. I think this is an area that we could do much more on in the UK, and certainly Innovate UK is definitely committed to supporting that where possible. One last point to me as I close off, which is very important to me, and that is that I think we have a big secret underused weapon in the UK. I think we have an excellent potential diverse talent base that has not been fully exploited here in the UK, in our own country. And to exploit it, we need to give more people the chance. We need to be more welcoming to encourage people to become innovators, to welcome them into an innovation journey, to welcome them towards becoming entrepreneurs. And so we need to embrace the diversity that we have in the UK, not make those people who don't feel part of this feel that they should remain that way. We should embrace that and work out how to eliminate barriers, how to be welcoming, how to encourage diversity, equality, and inclusion, because that is not just the right thing to do from a human point of view, it's the right thing for us to do as a country from an economic point of view. And I think it's one of our secret weapons for the UK. Having lived and worked in Silicon Valley and throughout different parts of the world, I can tell you that our diversity, if we could use it, is one of the most important things we have as a country. And I really would wish you as the future leaders to be able to help with that as well. And so I wish you all the best for your future careers. The UK needs great innovators. The UK needs great leaders. And really importantly, we need great leaders who understand and can lead business innovation. So I wish you all the best, and thank you very much for the attention and for inviting me to this event. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rory.
Thank you so much, Indro, for the really insightful perspective, particularly your move from private sector into the public sector, and framing all of the things which happen and need to work for us to have this brilliant innovation ecosystem, and actually connected to so much we've discussed with future leaders this year and also across the last 2 days of the conference as well. I will now introduce our next brilliant speaker. We have Dr. Peter Waggett, who is the Director of Research for IBM UK. He leads research teams at the Hursley and Daresbury labs, and these teams conduct fundamental research activities and deliver first-of-a-kind proof of concept systems for a wide range of commercial and public sector organisations, again, across the innovation ecosystem. Dr. Waggett has specific research interests in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and image processing. He also sits on the EPSRC Digital Economy Programme Advisory Board and the Home Office Biometric and Forensic Ethics Group. So thank you so much, Peter. I will now hand over to you for the talk.
Hi there. Hopefully you can see my slides. What I'm just trying to outline is the programme that I'm involved with, which is where the UK has decided to work together with the public and private sector to come together to do a research capability that can help UK become more competitive on a global stage. So I'm currently director of IBM in the UK, and if we can move on the slide. Oh, there we go. We're working. Sorry about that. Yeah. So a global IBM has a global research capability. I run a couple of labs in the UK. What's important, though, is that we act as a single body to pull together a research vision that we then take out to work with public and private sector partners. Clearly, for us, this is an important asset. And really why we think it's becoming increasingly important is that, we've identified that, there's a need for science to tackle the big problems that we've got. And the other activity that's happening is that, we've identified that actually we're moving from a completely new paradigm of experience. So we're predicting that, clearly big data driven science has a huge role to play, but that we think that we're going to need to move beyond that and into an area where we're calling accelerated discovery. And so what do I mean about that? Then really what we're looking at is trying to deploy scientific knowledge at scale. We're trying to take advantage of AI to generate hypotheses and develop a whole series of processes and move to actually testing out autonomously ideas and thoughts that are being generated by systems to tackle some of these big problems. One of the things that we've set ourselves is a series of goals and challenges as to what we're looking to get out of this. And as an example of how these come together is that, we're looking to set ourselves the challenge of developing processes that will reduce by a factor of 10 the time taken to develop new materials, and also reduce the cost by a factor of 10. And that, to us, is the goal. And how we're actually tackling that, we're looking to try and effectively supercharge the scientific method. So, this is what we're all familiar with. We do research, we hypothesize, we test, we assess, we report, and we work our way around. And clearly that has brought some great rewards and great dividends. But what for us is really important is that to take that to this next stage of accelerated discovery, what we need to do is really break it down and put it all back together again. So, we're looking at doing things like AI-powered deep search. So this is really providing capabilities to delve into scientific literature at scale, recognizing that it's impossible to keep pace with the amount of information that's being published, and making sure that we can actually distill that literature through autonomous systems to come up with the nuggets of information that we need to actually make processes. Having done that, look to improve our knowledge in those areas where we have gaps. So using AI and quantum enriched simulations to actually fill in some of the gaps in our knowledge. Once we've gone through that process, look to generate new models using AI to give us the best winnowing down of the degrees of freedom to enable us to really run this stuff through in a completely autonomous lab to get results very rapidly. So I say, when you break it down in that fashion, I say what we'll look able to predict is that for new materials, which could be for carbon capture, could be for better batteries, or increased capability for photovoltaics, what we're hoping to do is to pull those times down to by a factor of 10 and reduce the cost of them. Now, clearly, that's something that we're providing as a capability. And what we want to do with that capability is work with partners, work with our ecosystem to actually deploy our tools to enable them to make the advances that we think we need. This is all well and good, but one of the things that has become apparent to us is that actually, when you start to apply these sort of techniques, there's a problem. And I'm calling it sort of like, an emerging technology challenge. really what we're looking to do is to enable people to understand what's going on with the new technologies, why it's important to them, give them the skills to do that, because clearly, some of these things require a different skill set to the ones that you're likely to be working with. Integrating it into enterprise systems and providing the infrastructure to actually run this thing on. I guess the first area that we're looking at, though, is it's really quite important to understand why this is important. And I go back to what you would call sort of like a marketing 101 diagram. This is the sort of thing that you see in a marketing textbook where a new technology gets launched, the technology enthusiasts and the visionaries pick it up. It then gets passed over to mainstream business. It starts to decline as a new technology comes along to replace it. And then finally, you've just got a series of laggards that are following things through. Well, that's all well and good. But actually, I guess this is probably, for me, I think, a very important diagram. And this really came out of work that was done by a guy called Jeff Moore in California in the late 80s. And what he postulated was that actually for high technology, for the things that we think we need to deploy to make a difference and to make an impact, that easy sort of like standard deviation curve, bell curve, is not really working. And what he really pointed out was that you actually get a disconnect between the early adopters and the mainstream business. And he called it a chasm. And really what it's all about is saying, how do you actually get these two different communities talking to each other such that the mainstream business understands the advantages of a new technology, and the technologists understand what they need to do to actually make it relevant to the business and close that gap up. Some of you may be familiar with things like the Gartner hype curve, and it's really sort of like a different way of explaining why you get this, huge wave of publicity about how a new technology is going to have a major impact, and then it seems to sort of like fall into abeyance until you finally get the mainstream activity coming across. And so this playing in the chasm is very important. You need deliberately to have multidisciplinary teams. You need to have those teams able to communicate ideas and thoughts with each other. They need to come together around common languages and common concepts, and they need to be able to demonstrate the value of a particular technology. So one of the things that we've been working with IBM researchers with the Science and Technology Facilities Council is to develop what we're calling the Hartree National Centre for Digital Innovation. And really what we're all about is accelerating the adoption of new technologies and providing UK industry and academic groups access to a series of things that will make all the difference. So it's not just machines, although there are high performance computers we can get access to. And it's not just people, because we're able to find people that have got the skills to enable us to work in that sort of chasm. But it's really putting all of those things together such that we've got a one-stop shop where people could come to us with challenges in any different, a range of different sectors, and we will put together a solution based around some of these concepts of accelerating discovery and transitioning technology and enabling them to do that in a very easy to adopt fashion. So going through some of the activities we've got, as I said, it's a new collaborative partnership between IBM Research and STFC, launched in May this year, and it is a true partnership. So decision-making is done between the two groups. We have a management board which has equal representation, and that decides which projects we pick up and evolve. It's manned by public and private sector researchers. So half the researchers will be coming from IBM, half of them will be coming from SDFC. But it's all about enabling businesses and public sector organizations to adopt AI and quantum computing. So it's, like I say, it's meant to be a one-stop shop. You come to us with your challenge, you come to us with your problem. We will develop proof of concepts that will enable them to articulate the benefits and move it to the point where they can adopt it into their organizations, and on the way through de-risk the solutions such that we're able to actually come out with a properly researched business case that enables people to make sensible investment decisions. So there's four main activities. Explain is really a program of work we've got which will enable people to come to us and get training in AI systems and quantum computing. It's provided on a free basis to enable people to come in, reskill or upskill some of their activity, and we're really looking to cast the net quite widely as to who we can get involved in these sort of activities. But it's all about widening the talent pool in the UK. We then move on to explore. And in explore, what we're looking to do is to take proof of concept to tackle particular challenges that are brought to us by, I say, either public or private organizations can come to us with a challenge. And really what we're looking for in that instance is the ability for the organization that's coming to us to actually give us a technical challenge that we believe that AI can help, and we will take that challenge and come up with a proof of concept. Now, for the organizations coming to us with these sort of challenges, the proof of concept stage, what we're looking for is interest, involvement, and in effect, some kind of a desire to make this happen. We provide the people and the machinery and all of the other elements needed to make that proof of concept a reality. And at that point, we hand over the results of this in the form of sort of like a business proposition that companies can then decide whether to take forward either with us or go their own way with the results that come out of the Explore setup. Once we've done that Explore stage, the next activity we're looking at is what we're calling Accelerate. Now, the key part of Accelerate for us is this is how we are hoping to take what's come out of the proof of concepts and embed it into UK organizations such that they see competitive advantage. So it's a lot of this is going to be less to do with the R&D activities, because in the previous proof of concepts will have solved those sort of challenge. This is much more about how do we practically implement this in a fashion such that the business can see business benefit and can deliver it off the systems that they've chosen. Like I say, the help that we give at this point is entirely under the direction of the organization that we're working with. They can come to us and say, yeah, love the proof of concept. We think that this is important for our business. We just want to go away and invest ourselves in building up our own capability, and that's fine. It may be that they are at a completely different point of the spectrum, and they may say to us, oh, okay, we see what impact the results of these proof of concepts are going to have on our business. How do we actually get you to deliver those results to us in a seamless fashion such that we can just take it and run our business? And that, again, is equally fine. Obviously, the challenge for some organizations is that, if your mainstream business is not involved with AI or quantum, you may decide that you don't want to invest in what may become a sort of like a niche skill for you, but you are desperately keen to take advantage of the benefits that come from the system. Either of those approaches is perfectly supported by the system that we're developing up at the Hartree Centre, and each of them is something that is, seen to be equally beneficial to UK industry and organisations. The final one, we're looking at as sort of like a resilience point of view. Clearly, there are a lot of new technologies coming downstream that could have an impact in terms and could aid UK organisations. Main one, that we're seeing at the moment is quantum computing. As an organisation, IBM has just launched its 127 qubit processor called Eagle. And at the 127 qubits, we're starting to reach the point where we can get results that will become game changers. That's not just the end of the road, though, for us in terms of quantum. Our roadmap that we've published has the next year providing a system with over 400 qubits and 1,000 qubits the year after. So, at those sort of levels for particular applications where quantum is applicable, and it may not be applicable for all of the setups that you're looking to use, you can see that we're reaching the point where quantum advantage is going to become a major participant. And so what we're saying with our approach here is that we are providing access into a quantum capability and understanding such that any solutions that you put in place to enable your activities through the first three of these phases, you can be underpinned by the fact that when new technologies come along, that there's an easy on-ramp to enable you to take that technology and put it back into your enterprise. So that really was what I was going to describe. Like I say, we are at IBM fully committed in the UK with 2 labs to provide access to a range of global capability that we have both in our lab and with our other ecosystem partners. With that access and the capability of working alongside the STFC at the Hartree Centre, what we're hoping is that for some of the major challenges that, as a society we face, we will be able to move UK capability forward and make sure that the UK is a place where careers can be developed right at the forefront of technology. So I think I'd stop at that point.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Peter. That was really interesting oversight of how the public and private sector can work together to bridge or cross the chasm or otherwise bridge the valley of death, of which we talk about so much in innovation. So it's really interesting. And again, tying back to skills, the importance of building that in businesses, it sounds like a really exciting project at Hartree. And I'm sure we will get lots of questions on that. So again, I'd encourage everyone viewing it to ask the questions in the Q&A tab. We're going to have plenty of time for questions as we're pretty ahead of schedule at the moment. Before we launch into the Q&A session, I'm delighted to introduce 2 of my peers on the Future Leaders programme. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Dan Veal, who is a programme manager at NPL, who's going to provide a short perspective on what we've heard today.
Thanks, Rory. Pleasure to be here and excuse me, to speak to everyone. So I work at a place called the National Physical Laboratory, which is what we call a PSRE, a public sector research establishment. And so what I find really interesting from the talks is that I think innovation is actually quite outside the bounds of normal project delivery, which a lot of people are used to. So it's quite difficult in the sense that it's emergent and it's nonlinear, and it requires people to touch on the areas that maybe aren't part of their core business, and And actually the program I run at the moment called the National Timing Centre, we're actually working with Innovate UK as a partner to deliver that. And so I've been involved in a lot of workshops, helping to scope some innovation calls, some grant funding that we're putting out. And it's been a real eye-opening experience because what we're trying to do is stimulate innovation. And we've got all these questions, which is, what's the right role for government in terms of where should we deploy the money? How should it be best deployed? What should the scope of what we define under, let's say, a grant call be? We've been doing lots of interfacing with business, and you get lots of quite honest feedback from them, and you start to discover some of the things that hold them back and some of the things that are frustrating for them. And so you try to do the best you can in terms of deploying that. So for me personally, it's been the last couple of years getting involved with Innovate as an example has been really interesting. And actually, Peter, who just gave the talk, he actually sits on the program's steering committee, so he opens into some of the high level direction of the program. So I think it's a good example of a number of government entities and industry working together. But again, it just strikes me that all the difficult things that we all face in sort of business and industry, things like diversity challenges and getting the right workforce and the right balance between government funding and not market making, as Indra mentioned, but supporting in the right way. I think it's a really interesting field with lots of challenges, and it really involves people communicating and talking to each other. But we often quite technical people who weren't used to talking to business people. They need to get together a lot more to be able to actually achieve some innovation. So that's just sort of my initial thoughts from that, but really interesting topic.
Thanks so much, Dan. Yeah, no, it's really interesting your perspective on how governments can work better with industry, but also some of those communication challenges that we can have between the different sectors as well, which is a perfect lead into introducing Vicky Newman, who is Communications Manager for Matrix, the Northern Irish Science Industry Panel, and also Pulsar, which is the online hub for women in STEM in Northern Ireland.
Sorry, my video's been stopped. Okay, can you see me yet?
Yes, we can see you, Vicky.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thanks. Thanks very much, Rory. And thank you to the speakers. And it was great to hear from Peter about the amazing work that's being done in Hartree. I was also really pleased to hear Indro talking about his ambitions for the new Innovate UK Plan for Action, particularly the reference to building local strengths across the UK regions. And that's a real interest to me, as I've been working as a communications manager in the Northern Ireland Department for the Economy for about 7 years now, and my focus is on innovation in science and technology. So innovation is also one of the 3 strands of the new Northern Ireland 10X economic vision, along with sustainability and inclusivity. So I would work directly with policy developers, as well as industry and academia. And one of my responsibilities is to find ways to promote innovation funding opportunities to businesses. So one of the problems we had at the start was about engagement. There's a really common misconception among our local businesses that UK funding calls were just too big to bid for. So Northern Ireland is very much an SME economy. In fact, about 99% of our businesses are small to medium size. And certainly in the past, it was the case that a lot of the large high profile funding calls would have been outside the capabilities of our businesses in terms of scope and submission deadlines. But we have recently had some really big successes through the Strength in Places Fund. Belfast Maritime Consortium was awarded 33 million in Wave 1 to develop zero emissions ferries. And there was a Photonics Consortium led by Seagate. It got 42 million in Wave 2, and it was one of 2 Northern Ireland bids to be shortlisted in Wave 2. So that level of success for us is quite unprecedented. However, I would have to say the biggest win for us so far has been the Small Business Research Initiative, or SBRI. And that has been really successful in Northern Ireland. And I think it's because it tends to be small business orientated, and also that it encourages startups. So in case you don't know, SBRIs are basically a way for the public sector to procure new technology. So if the organization can't find a solution in the current marketplace, they can use an SBRI, and that allows them to run a competition to solve the problem instead. So rather than them having to write a full technical specification for a product that might not even exist, they can simply pose their problem and ask businesses to pitch solutions. And it's a very low risk way for successful companies. It's low risk for successful companies. They get 100% funding to develop the ideas. and they still retain their IP. And it's also a really good way to bring together local public sector and SMEs. We have had some incredible wins over the last few years. For example, we had this tiny AI startup called Kinsetsu, and they won an SBRI a few years back. It was to track children to make school bus runs safer. And now they're working with the Royal Navy to track and monitor crew on their aircraft carriers. So I think, that is a great example of Indro's aim to help businesses to grow and scale by de-risking innovation. Even though SBRIs are such a good fit for Northern Ireland businesses, they were quite slow to take off initially too. And what I wanted to say was I think that's where local presence really matters. There's a very strong network over here of people working hard to make sure that Northern Ireland businesses know all about the innovation funding opportunities. And equally, the UK government knows about our innovative businesses. So for example, I would work really closely with Lorraine Atchison, who is the Innovate UK Regional Manager, and she has done an awful lot to develop a really strong network here in Northern Ireland. Gillian Gregg, who runs the Royal Academy of Engineering Enterprise Hub, she's done some incredible work too, and there are many others working in this space, but I think those two deserve a special mention. So our local knowledge lets us identify and highlight national funding opportunities and shape the local funding calls. So we would run workshops on how to write good funding bids, we hold launch events for new competitions, and we really talk to and listen to the businesses to find out what they need. We also look very closely at the language we use in our communications and how we promote competitions. So as Nick said earlier, plain English is so important. So between all of us, we've been able to identify, I think, where there might be issues and work together to solve them. And I think this network of really committed people working closely across government, industry and academia here is what's contributing to Northern Ireland's recent funding success. We feel like all the work has paid off for us, and we're aiming to run 15 new SBRIs in Northern Ireland this year. They're going to be funded directly by the Department for the Economy, and they'll be focusing on the 10X themes of innovation, sustainability and inclusivity. And that's all going to support startups, going to encourage innovation, grow the economy and solve problems for the public sector here. So to me, that's a perfect example of how to innovate for change. So I'll hand you back to Rory now, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Vicky, for the really great perspective and input from the developed nations of what we're doing in innovation as well, and also how we get past some of those communication issues. As I often say, yeah, jargon can get very frustrating, but brilliant. So I will now request all the panelists to turn their cameras on so we can see everyone. And again, I'd encourage everyone watching the session today to put your questions in for Q&A. If you can't think of a question, you like some of the questions that have been posted, please click the thumbs up button. You can upvote it, so we'll go up in the order that I ask it as well. You can target the questions towards specific panelists. We can also open up the question to the floor as well. Brilliant. So looking at the questions we have at the moment, I'm going to start with one for Indro from Carlan, who's interested in how we will know the success of the innovation strategy in terms of its measurement. So what are those indicators?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Rory, and thanks, Carlan, for the question. I think that's a good place to start. So as Dan mentioned, innovation can be an emergent and non-linear process. So it's sometimes quite difficult to precisely track it and measure it. So we have some primary measurements to do with overall impact on the economy, to do with gross value add, GDP, size of business, how businesses grow, etc. We also track things like leverage of private money. So businesses that we've invested in can go on and they raise multiple rounds of private capital. So this is another area. And there are many other areas. And so we're in the process at the moment of putting a dashboard together to fulfill all of the plan for actions. And so if anybody has got the time to do so, please look at the plan for action, which was launched last week. And you'll see that there are a number of points in it. And we are currently putting together a full holistic dashboard to fully populate all that, because I'm also keen on looking at things like pipeline of skills. Do we have the skills for the future? Do we have the talent? Do we have the right regional deployment? I completely agree with Vicky's articulation of the need to make sure that we embrace the fact that regionally we are different across the whole of the UK. There are quite different situations in terms of size of business, types of business, issues to do with diversity, issues to do with economy, and so forth. And so therefore, tracking performance across multiple axes is a very important thing, and all of that is currently being put together. And I'd be happy to, if there's an opportunity in the future, to share how that's gone over our journey. So this is the journey that we're on now over the next months. So hopefully, Carl-Anne, that's a good, decent enough answer to your question.
Thank you so much, Indro. That was really interesting to understand how it's going to be tracked across the whole of a nation and considering that regional perspective. And I think the next question, and I can see that Peter has already responded to it, is thinking about the puzzle of UK's low productivity. And I know that Peter's responded from a more industry perspective. Dan, I'm wondering if you could provide a perspective thinking about the work that you're doing with industry on how that might look in terms of increasing productivity.
Interesting question. It relates a little bit actually to what Indra was talking about in terms of how you track. So I think there are a couple generally accepted measures how you measure productivity. But I know from if I look at a place like NPL, which is mostly about half government funded organization, what we often do is put quite simple measures out, which might bundle things like productivity and other things into one metric, which is very simply, that's not the only one, but how many pounds are returned to the economy for every pound of investment. And that is a way that you can bundle a lot of other metrics in together, and you might have to be a bit qualitative about some of them, but it's an easy way to do that. And it's one that industry, I think, can relate to a little bit because it's quite easy to be able to say, if this much is invested in the company or this is invested in that part of the sector, that this will return. So I realize I'm not directly answering the productivity bit, but I think from a government perspective, I think a return on investment in terms of money that you use different metrics to bundle into is a slightly easier way to think about it. Productivity is quite important, but in the end, the actual return on investment is always something you're measured against. And if you're successful in producing return on investment to the economy, then that's a really good indicator that actually productivity is going up as well.
I would, sorry, can I just add quickly to what Dan said and also Peter's answer? I would do two simple things. One is to invest in innovation and the other is to invest in skills. And I think if we can have two very clear mantras that say that and do that, and I think that's essential to our future. And I believe that's what was stimulated by the innovation strategy and some of the theme that we have at the moment. So I think this is a very good time to pay attention to this. But I think innovation and skills are the two things that I think will address our productivity gap.
Can I pick up on the answer to Carl-Anne's question as well, which is that I think one of the things that's become much more apparent is that UKRI is now very joined up. And one of the things that is even apparent at the level that we're working at with the Hartree Centre is that we get a series of performance measures that are challenging. They keep me awake at night anyway, and enable us to verify that we've actually made the impact that we said that we would. So, and those measures are very wide-ranging. So it may be jobs in a particular area, jobs in a particular skill. It can be the number of projects we take, the number of people that we have through our education courses. So, all of these things are passed up the chain within UKRI, such that UKRI can make sure that it's meeting its commitments, which is the increase in productivity, or the amount of spend on R&D and the impact that gives to us. So it's I'm of an age such that when I did early programs with at that point I think it was the SRC, there was very little checks or balances to what had been done. It's a very different game now. It's very hard-headed, and it needs to be, because we're talking about large quantities of money that are being invested. But everything that is measured feeds back up into a performance indicator at the top level, such that UKRI can justify what that the UK is getting value for the money it's investing.
Thank you so much. That was, really interesting, broad perspective on the need to track and assess the impact we're having from the investment, which I know, very well from a university innovation perspective. I'm wondering, connecting to that, Vicky, if you had any thoughts on how having that localized network within the devolved nations can help to specifically target that increased productivity and that access to these innovation streams. So I know you've touched on that a bit already.
I think it's really important. One of the best things that Lorraine Atchison did a year or two ago was to actually set up what she calls the Innovate UK Family in Northern Ireland. So we get together every 2 months on a particular theme. And it would be all the people, EPSRC, the Royal Academy, ourselves, and we all just share our experiences and share the themes that we see coming through. And we have found that just such a useful way to collaborate, to see the issues coming down the track, and to see how all our different programs sort of fit together best, So yeah, personally, I've found that really helpful, if that's any use.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Vicky. And as a slight, interest from Indro is if you had any thoughts on how we could share that kind of best practice from devolved nations across the whole of the UK, conscious that there's some similarities, but also some unique programs that happen only in the devolved nations.
Yes, we have programs across all the English regions and the devolved nations, each of which has a different flavour. So I just want to again emphasize Vicky's point from earlier. The reason why place and local is important is because the needs and the profiles are quite different. And so there are programs right across the UK in terms of convening what, as I described, this ecosystem of different bodies. There are academic bodies, research bodies, local government bodies, many bodies. And so this word family that Lorraine uses for Northern Ireland is a word that we use across different parts of the UK. So, and that's a very important part of our work going forward. So actually we are very much ready. The place agenda has taken some people by surprise, but we're already ready for that, because we're already working in that quite inclusive way across the whole of the UK, acknowledging the differences across. So we think that's a very important area.
Thanks. That's brilliant, Indro. And I think it's a slight change of pace. I received a question on the tension between the need to adjust and respond to the rapid pace of S&T development versus the need to commit to investment to pull that development through. I'm wondering, firstly, Peter, if you might have a perspective on that in light of Hartree in particular.
Yeah, and I think there is a tension between two, and I think Neil's right to point that out. One of the things that we're hoping to do with Hartree is to tackle some of the entry barriers for the early scale development. And what that means is that if you wanted to test out a particular AI or quantum solution to solve your problem, as an industry, it would be very difficult to justify, okay, let's buy all the hardware, let's build a center to put the things in, let's populate it with people, let's do the testing, let's come up with all the solutions, and then we can decide whether we get the results back that justify us going from, if you like, lab scale up to enterprise scale. So by taking away that initial investment such that you can basically come to us with a problem, we will develop a proof of concept. And a key part of that proof of concept is not just the technical de-risking, it's the commercial de-risking, such that you can actually then make a reasoned sort of like decision about whether the investment that you're going to need to make to get the performance improvements, the productivity improvements, or even just tackling a new sector are justified. So I think what we're hoping with the Hartree is that we take some of that tension away. There clearly are still things that you as an organisation in the UK will want to do yourself, and you will have to worry about those sort of things. But by taking that away, that first entry barrier, we hope we're making things easier by reducing that tension. And it's the same thing that happens within, IBM as a research division. We're seen as the bellwether of the organisation as to where we should be going. Every year we do a 10-year plan as to what industry is going to need, what society is going to need, and then we do, if you like, a gap analysis to work out where we should put our research money. Where we may make a decision is that it's actually an easier approach to buy in a solution to part of the problem, and then put together the whole sort of package. But again, it's that overall investment case that requires us to provide the detail and not just say, well, we think it's going to be good, give us some money and we'll go away and do it. It is now very hard-headed and very a sort of like a professional approach to some of these activities. And I know that because I get involved with a lot of university programs. Sometimes with people coming up through their careers in the early stages, that some of the performance measures, some of the measurements you're asked to put into some of these things may seem to be just a waste of time. Why am I doing this? And the real activity is you're providing input that enables people to take those top level investment decisions in particular technologies. So yeah, great question, Neil.
Thanks so much, Peter. And Indra, I'm wondering if you had a perspective from this as well, given the connection between the government funding and the private sector funding, and how Innovate UK could support that pool and competition in terms of funding.
I would very much echo Peter's comments. I would say that there are always going to be gaps, and we have to be alive to those gaps and see what we can do to help. There are going to be white spots where there is an imbalance between the different speeds that different parts of the system are working at. I would also, as a business guy, add another perspective to this, which is the perspective of the matching of innovation speed to market cycles, and sometimes even vice versa. So you've got situations where, in order to meet certain market cycles according to the market segment that you'll go into, you need to tailor speed innovation at different speeds, and that also is a challenge as well. So just to extend to this part of the question, I think there are speed matching and potential gaps in all parts of the area which we need to be alive to, and ultimately can be extremely relevant to how competitive we are as a set of businesses in the UK and as an economy. So getting that speed matching right, I think, is a very big point.
Thanks so much, Indro. Yeah, no, it's a really interesting perspective coming from a biotech background. Our speed of development is definitely behind that of some of the other sectors. So that's perfect. I think the next question, and I might start with Dan on this perspective, is working in university, we work at that very initially fundamental work. We're increasingly driven to do more applied research, push up the TRL, but I'm interested in what the work of the arm's length bodies could do to try and actually propel and almost catalyze that increase in pulling through the innovation from an academic level into that application.
Sure, I'll tackle that one. I mean, that's one of the reasons that, say, the catapults were put in place, was this kind of divide, and how do you pull the really excellent research that's done in the UK into more economic impact. There's kind of an acknowledged state in the UK where we've got great universities, great research, and there's a sense that we're not as good as some other countries. Let's say the US is pulling that through, and I'm sure Indra spends a lot of his time thinking about how to what structural reasons there might be for that and how we can overcome them. I think if I take my company as an example, National Physical Laboratory, what we did a few years ago, we actually established a postgraduate institute because we're quite dependent on innovation and pulling through research and for the applied measurement work that we do. So we actually started something called the PGI. We're structurally, a government has set us up with some partnerships with Strathclyde University and University of Surrey. So by the structure of the organization, by some initiatives we've done, we have actively pursued closer relations so that we can draw in more postgrads, we can draw in more PhD students because there's a bit of a home for them and they feel that there's a bigger, let's say, draw for them because it's going to benefit them because they can be part of something. So I think, at least again, from I'll just speak on from what I know in that sphere, I think creating the right partnership so that you don't just look like a company or don't just look like a government department, I think is quite important because you have to draw people in and you have to entice them. Otherwise, you will lose them, almost immediately because a startup is going to get what they want for a really high-profile placement with a good professor at university. So the more you can join up and make it attractive, I think that's a key thing that can be done.
Thanks so much, Dan. And again, yeah, it's tying back to that skill sets and requirement for talent. Did anyone else on the panel have any perspectives? Oh, Indro, I will hand it over to you.
So just under, historically, just under £1 out of every £5 we spend goes to universities. So it's a very substantial amount of money that we deploy. And we do that to support a number of programs, some collaborative R&D programs, but also programs where we would be assisting the secondment of university people into businesses to help those businesses in terms of the growth journeys that they want to go on. And this fosters an outstanding collaboration between universities and businesses. Then there are examples like catapults, which is what Dan mentioned a second ago. And then there are programs where we would help universities to, in terms of their spin-outs, in terms of the work that they do to go forward. And I'm really pleased, Rory, that you talked about pull actually earlier. So you used the word pull. Many people use the word push first. So the area that I think is very exciting is when you can get business and market pull of brilliant work done in universities that gets translated into business. I completely understand that that's not always the case, and sometimes you have to have a push approach more because sometimes that's just how it is. I'm also a strong believer in the fluidity of a system, so I don't support some people who talk about this very linear system that goes from one step to another level. I think it's a very fluid system and it hinges around collaboration. And so I think the links with universities is extremely important and one of the strong areas for us as a nation, actually. I would also suggest that it's very important for us to, when doing this work, and we certainly do this as Innovate UK, it's important to look at the entire spectrum of universities that we have in the UK. Sometimes the Russell Group universities get a very strong prominence, understandably. These are huge global brands. These are for innovators, leaders, to also look beyond that and look to universities across our entire spectrum. So there are many good local universities that are doing good work locally. So those are some points I just wanted to add, Rory. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Indro. And I can see we've had a lot more questions pulled through. So we've got one from Simon, which is how important is the actually, I will switch to the I switched to another question from Simon, and actually that will lead into the other one as well. So a decade ago, innovation was seen as the disruptive, which was actually seen as a virtue at the time. I think, is disruption or growth the aim now? And is it a matter of growing and developing markets instead of dramatic change? Which I'm going to hand over to Peter as the first stage of the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Simon, for this question. I think it's a good one again. I think the tack I would take is that I run the research division, and we're all about disruptive technologies. My counterparts that are in the development division are all about incremental growth. So if they're looking for every year getting 5% improvement on performance, for them that's a great measure. If I go to our strategy meetings and planning meetings and say I'm going to get 5% growth year on year, I'd probably be kicked out, because what we're looking for is the things that are going to make the 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times improvement. Now, the timetable for that improvement may be 5 years or something like that. But at that level, I'm seen to be doing my job. Now, along the way, I may trash some of the disruptively improved, the development of improved products along the way. So, it may well be that in 5 years' time, a complete product line is invalidated by me and my activities. But again, that's good. But it's so, I think it's depending on where you sit in the organization, it's a case of you're either about disruption or it's incremental growth. And I say, if we try and cross over the boundaries, then that causes us problems. But certainly for my research team, it's all about what is disruptive and coming down the line.
I think part of the only thing I think that's a brilliant answer from Peter, by the way. The only thing I'd add is that I think the word innovation is a word that is used very frequently to mean all kinds of different things. I've noticed recently, by the way, I had this, I've used the expression "I am Spartacus" because I've noticed a lot of people who've jumped onto the innovation bandwagon for various reasons recently, of things that are actually not innovation at all, but they are labeled as such. As a result of it being used for different things, you can use it and people will use it. And this is, I think, part of Simon's question and part of Peter's really excellent answer just then, which is that if you use it in the same way to mean different things, you will get that confusion between the thing. And I think there's quite different from the work that Peter's doing, which is inherently disruptive, to then the business innovation, the business development work that happens. And I think those are in entirely different pace things. And they're also different timescales as well. They're getting to market at different levels. I'm sure Peter's business division won't necessarily be delighted if his innovation disruption will completely wreck their P&L for the next, for the next budget period. So I'm sure there's always that thing. So there is that balance on how the word is used in different parts of the chain.
I think that's right. What we're aiming to do is have a portfolio of things, but certainly if in 5 years I trash something, that's fine. But if I do it next week, then that's probably a problem.
Exactly.
Thanks so much, Peter and Indro. That's a interesting perspective and about the word innovation, which it's a personal challenge as I'm called the Innovation Fellow. But the next one, and again, this is a question from Simon, and it's thinking about how important is the international dimension and collaboration in emerging technologies, and if Brexit has had any impact. I'm wondering to start, Vicky, if you had any perspective on thinking about the devolved nations and international collaboration within those.
There's not really enough that I can say to this.
I think it's important. What I hope I got across was that in the first couple of slides is that although I'm part of a UK organisation, I'm also part of a bigger global group. And for us, how that works is that every year we do a plan, which is we call it a science and technology outlook, or the global technology outlook, that gives the vision as to where we need to be in 10 years' time. That plan is then broken down into individual challenges. So, which bits are we going to try and address that we haven't got the capability now, but we need that underpinning capability? And then those challenges get laid out to our research organisation, and say we're about 3,000 strong at the moment, and individual researchers that have the answer to some of those challenges will effectively group together around the challenge and will then pursue that activity. What we've been very good at recently is breaking down the artificial barriers we have about where people are based. So, my team is tackling a number of challenges, and on those challenges, some of them are manned up entirely by my team. Some of them, I may only have one person on that team, and the rest of it comes from different labs. So, what we're hoping to do is to, I guess it's almost like diversity writ large. We're looking for the individuals that can best contribute to a particular challenge and allowing them to make that contribution into the space. So for us, the national boundaries are broken down to enable us to get the best results in terms of developing that activity.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Peter. And I think as a follow-up, one of the other questions is it's actually asked what measures are there for protecting the national investment from overseas mergers and acquisitions while keeping connected to the global supply of skills. Realizing there's something there for Indro, but I didn't know if you had a perspective on that from a kind of private sector.
Yes, so before I touch on that, I'd just like to also, so on the general international thing, I think Peter's just illustrated brilliantly what it's like to be in a large global multinational, which of course his company is. And I've had my time in that world as well in the semiconductor business, where I was running large divisions of multinationals, where you weren't really specifically interested where you did things. You looked at everything as one system. I think the world has changed actually in the last few years. I've seen there's definitely a move away from globalization. By the way, that's not a political point, but it's just an observation that I've spotted amongst people. And we also have to be aware that as a country, we're a relatively small country, and our businesses don't have the same access to a market scale like they do in America or in China or even in Germany, which is obviously a bigger market. And so our businesses deem to be able to compete and work successfully on the global scale as is right for their own particular product or service or whatever it is that they're doing. The question that's been asked about the protection is a really essential question, and I don't think that we yet have a very clear answer for that in the UK, other than I can share with you just trends that I can see. On the one hand, there is the need for capital, and sometimes that capital comes from sources that people may not like those sources, and in which case then does that capital get considered differently from other capital and so forth. So this is a challenge, and there's a phrase that's used, technology sovereignty, and this is the phrase to explain the challenge that we have as a country as to what is it that we really need to be able to either put our arms around or be able to guarantee on a very strong partnership basis that keeps us doing what we want to do as a country. You all may know that at the moment there is a strong shortage of semiconductors for various reasons, and having spent more than half my career in the semiconductor industry, I could really feel, I know what that kind of thing means, and I know the dynamics around that sort of thing. And we don't have any large-scale semiconductor production in the UK, as you all may know. There are other areas where we are quite exposed as a country in terms of these things. And so the question for you as leaders, for us as a nation, and for our government is, what do we want to do in order to make that technology sovereignty, and what are the effects of it? Because if we do something, does that mean that we can't partner in the same way with certain nationalities of companies, certain sources of capital, so every action has a reaction. And so I think it's quite a complex issue that we're going through. There's a lot more cases where things are referred on national security basis at the moment. There's a couple of mergers that are taking place, potential mergers, sorry, that are taking place in various high-tech areas at the moment that are being considered. And so I think this is a big area for all of us as leaders to look at and just keep a strong eye on how this evolves in terms of this technology sovereignty that develops. Because if our supply chain can't access critical technologies, critical components, we're in a very, very, very weak position. And actually, just recently, the whole thing that we did as a country in vaccines is an interesting example of an area where we were able to do something very quickly, very importantly, and secure a supply chain. So that's an example where it goes very well. So those are some thoughts.
Thanks so much, Indra. That was, and Peter, that was a really interesting perspective on our kind of international competition, but thinking about how we can execute that on a national scale. And I'm going to open up the next two questions to the panel. Well, the first one is actually thinking about how can public procurement help drive innovation? Who would like to tackle that question first?
Well,
I can make a comment. Lots and lots of answers. I think one thing which I've seen in one of the recent innovation calls we've put out, is that one of the benefits of public funding is that you get companies to work together in ways they wouldn't normally work together. And I think that's a massive benefit. If you look at what Peter's done between IBM and STFC, that's the investment that UKRI is putting into that is critical to that working together, and it should have some really good impacts. And equally, when we put a recent call together for £2 million, we had an additional about £1.3 million investment in industry because it was part funding. And I think of the 17 projects we funded, I can't tell you the exact number, but there were 26 companies involved for 17 projects. So there was actually a lot of collaboration. What you find is that when you go into a lot of industry events in a bit of a niche area around timing and navigation, positioning, and events, lots of people talk to each other and you slowly build partnerships, and then they're catalyzed by having sources of funding. So that's not the only reason, and it's certainly not the only reason you do that, but it's absolutely a really positive benefit, because you kind of force people together because there's a common objective, which is to get funding to do something novel.
I think there are many, Vicky mentioned earlier about the SBRI program, which is a great example of that, and we're looking to expand that going forward. There are plenty of great examples of the relevance of leveraging the connections between government through different parts of it, be it the health service, be it transport, be it energy, where we are running a number of important programs, and the private sector, and especially small businesses, which gives them access to those things. The only thing I would say to add to that, because I think I'm very positive about that, and I think it's very, very important, but just important for everyone here as leaders just to be aware of, that everything to do with the public sector has to have a very, very distinct balance, and it's just important to be outspoken about this. So on the one hand, you want to give access to companies, to businesses, to entrepreneurial technologies, etc., which could benefit those businesses and benefit the country by that interaction. And on the other hand, you have to go through very strict rules and protocols to make sure about fair competition, to make sure about proper use of public money, etc., etc., etc. And I think it's just important to make that balance. Where it works well, it's all great. Where it works badly, one side or other becomes frustrated. And that's something that we have to work on. So I'm just raising this to be realistic about it. It's just a real thing that happens in this environment. As leaders, we just have to be realistic to understand that small businesses will sometimes become frustrated with some of the rules, regulations that you have to go through. And it's just one of those things. We have to help each other, but acknowledge that spending public money has responsibility to it as well.
I think also large businesses can get frustrated.
Fair enough.
Thanks so much for the discussion on the challenges of public procurement. And this might, well, another topical thing is, again, it's thinking about regulation in the context of innovation. It's the question I've got is, how can regulation enhance or inhibit innovation?
I could go first if you like. So regulation is a very relevant thing in innovation. Take, for example, life sciences. There are many aspects of life sciences where our regulatory environment is a very favorable one for businesses to develop and flourish, as opposed to some other countries where it's actually less favorable. Regulation, deregulation, appropriate regulations, these are important things. The current Science and Innovation Minister, George Freeman, recently appointed, at the turn of this year, led a committee to look at the impact of regulation on innovation and the economy. And from that, there was some very, very good work that came out of it, and some very interesting conclusions and suggestions and ideas. And so regulation and innovation are very strongly connected, and there's a lot of, we put a lot of effort into that part of it across many different market sectors.
Thanks so much, Indro. Was there any other perspectives on this from across the panel?
I can maybe comment. I think another, so often you bundle standards, legislation and regulation together. And I would say this kind of touches on the international aspect. So if you take standards as an example, which is usually the thing that kind of filters down and becomes regulation nationally, having a seat at the table of the right technical people, the right government people, developing the right standards. So if you look at the telecoms industry, which is very, very, very heavy on standards, and that enables the coordination around the world, enables interoperability, but it also enables your country's supply chain to get their foot in, as it were, because your perhaps your own manufacturing strengths or your own design strengths or whatever can be catered for, as much as possible in the standards, which allow you to then have opportunities, in a certain sector. So I think there's, apart from, again, the points you made, I think there's a very strong case to be really internationally active. And if you get the standards bit right, then the other stuff follows, a bit more, and it will, it may constrain things, or it appears to constrain things, because you've got certain standards that everyone must abide by. It allows you the freedom to operate and give you that export market, because you don't just have to build things for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Dan. I get involved, I chair an ISO standards committee around cards and devices for personal identification. And, in that space, we've managed to make it such that, you can basically fly anywhere in the world knowing that your bank card will work, that, all of your, access codes and things are all equally set up. And what that meant was that, UK industry can develop a solution that can be marketed worldwide. And that all of that sort of capability has come from the fact that the standards have enabled you to mix and match elements of a solution. So I mean, I say, obviously, as a chair of standards group, I'm fiercely supportive that standards can be a force for good in this space.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for the really broad spectrum of opinions from across innovation. We have now reached our time limit, and I hope everyone has enjoyed the panel session across really, a broad variety of topics. Thank you so much again to our presentations from Indra and Peter, and to my brilliant peers on the Future Leaders Programme, Dan and Vicky. I'll also add at this stage, as this is the final talk, that if you would like to get these opportunities to have these interesting discussions in the Future Leaders Programme, the applications are open now for, I believe, another week. Please check out the website as well, as I'm sure that 2022 will be amazing and as good as 2021. So thank you to everyone again, and